This is a warning to all living mortals that on the 13th of December, Moose will release 13 of the most terrifying interviews of horror unto the world.
That's right, 13 brand new episodes in the month of December, leading up to our season premiere. And until then, Horror Hounds, mash on.
On the 11th day of Christmas, Moose brought to me Sean Michael Argo from the new Creepers Reborn.
Welcome, Horror Hounds, to another episode of the 13 Horror-fying Days of Christmas. I'm your host and gift giver, Moose. Today's gift is the gift of writing. And who better to talk about writing than the writer behind the reboot and relaunch of the Jeepers Creepers franchise, the writer of the movie, Mr. Sean Michael Argo.
Howdy, y'all. It's good to be here. Let's dive in.
So, let's just, off the top, how long have you been writing?
I am one of those guys that, round about age 8, I typed a comic book script on like an old school typewriter and gave my parents, a stack of 20 or so pages that of course took me forever. And that, like, I thought, oh, I will give you the gift of writing. Now I realize how arrogant that was, but I was 8.
Yeah.
But I've been that guy pretty much forever. Not necessarily professionally until maybe the last 10 years or so.
Nice.
But it's always been there.
So, in regards to Jeepers Creepers, how did that come about? Like, did you attack it first, or, like, was it, did they come to you and say, hey, we'd like you to work the script on this?
That was, I guess I would call it a sort of a Hollywood story, but like a really Raggedy Edge independent version of that. I spent some time as a defense contractor, and while I was doing that, I started writing a sci-fi series that ultimately got picked up to become a 6-episode miniseries. And we ended up shooting that in Louisiana at Orwo Studios. And, so you're talking like maybe 2 months of prep, because it's Casper Van Dien. It's like got a kind of a Starship Troopers vibe. And so it's just a real costume and set heavy. So it's like 2 months of prep, and then you're shooting for about 6 weeks. And so we're just down there in the trenches a lot together. And I heard through the grapevine, the crew grapevine, that the producers that were hosting us, Orwo Studios, that they had made Jeepers Creepers 3. And so I started snooping around the studio when, because I'm the writer, so I can kind of come and go as I please. And I found a bunch of these old sets from the third movie. And I was like, oh my God, they really did do this. So I just kind of very sneakily sort of asked around and figured out, who was who. And then I proceeded to spend the next 2 months just getting close to the producer and just being like, hey, I'm a super fan. I would like to write this movie. I wrote this series. You can see that I'm a professional. But I'm a real big super fan, so get ready, because I'm going to keep coming at you every day until you just let me do this. And yeah, after about a month and a half, by the time we were done with Salvage Marines, he finally was like, all right, I think you're the guy. You got I know you got the passion for it. You love the Creeper, so I'm going to give you your shot. So it was definitely one of those, right guy, right time, but also, if I'd have just asked him the first time, it would have been a no. I kept pushing, and you have to do that, because with an IP like that, especially such a spicy one, behind the camera and in front of the camera, that it took a lot for him to kind of, finally agree to it and be like, okay, I feel like this guy he's going to represent the franchise well off camera just as much as he's going to put his heart and soul into the movie itself. And that, they have to make decisions like that. I know that now. I didn't know that going into it, that, you're on and off the field, man.
Oh, yeah. It's funny that that's how it played out, because, like, when I reached out to you about setting up the interview, that's kind of how this set out, because, like, I interviewed you, and, I emailed you, and you could sense the hesitation in the message, like, yeah, like, 'cause I was like, are you the one who wrote the movie? Like, yeah, and it felt like a, yeah, why?
Yeah, well, it's funny. So for the longest time, I was getting just avalanches of requests for interviews and podcasts leading up to the movie, and contractually, myself and the director, like everything kind of had to go through a lot of different channels, so they weren't really letting us out into the wild until after the movie. So once the movie came out, then I could make my own choices about who I want to do interviews with and everything, and I was almost like kind of confused by the freedom, because I mean, like, again, I kind of like it though, because it's like a lot of the I would say less persistent, less passionate interviews and podcasts. Those guys asked once, and it was I'll send it to the producer. But the ones that I've really enjoyed doing are the ones who are like, did just come straight to me, and they're like, hey man, let's do this. And that's how I got the movie. So I'm like, all right, you got to respect the game.
They say it's all a hustle, no matter where you're at.
That's right.
Now, you guys got slammed in reviews on this movie.
And dragged on the internet. I've never received so much
vitriol.
Well, on one level, I've been in the movie business for about 20 years. I've been, writing professionally for about 10, so at the end of the day, every movie I've ever made as a producer or writer or director ends up getting called the worst movie ever made. I think that's most of us in the indie world. So there's always somebody on the internet that hates what you're doing, but there's always somebody else who, finds the good in it. And so kind of on one level, I was like, hey, that's part of the game. On another, and Timo and I've talked about this a little bit with each other, almost like a kind of a football players getting ready to go into the thick of the game, as we're like, we knew there's going to be a certain slice that are never going to like what you do. You're never going to be able to hold a candle to the first one. We're not the original guys. Like, you are set up to fail just by getting in the game on a certain level. But on another, it was just, I love that IP so much. And I realized I took some risks, and I realized I'm meandering a little bit, but like, I really wanted to make kind of a throwback sort of slasher, and not a creature feature. And I realized that was a big creative departure from the original three. And so I knew I was going to catch a little bit of heat for that. I caught a lot more than I expected, but that's all right. But at the end of the day, somebody has to be the first stormtrooper through the gate. Somebody's got to, and I'll say it plainly, somebody has to clean the Victor Salva out of that franchise. So now that it's out there, I'm supposed to come back for the next two movies. If they go in a different direction, there's rumors of a TV series. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm just kind of I'm a team player, so I jump when they say jump. But we took some risks, and we definitely made a departure. It's a lot more of a kind of an old school slasher meets a dark fairy tale style, just kind of everything. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's different. I mean, kind of top to bottom, it's different.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to do this interview, because it is such a hot topic franchise. Mm-hmm. And then, you watch Reborn, and it is a very stark contrast to, the original three. And, I mean, you just said it. You need that if this IP is going to do anything outside of the stain of Victor. Because,
right.
I mean,
you have to break hard. You have to break hard at a 90-degree angle. You got to break hard. So other creators later on down the road, or even myself, may head more towards a creature-ish kind of movie. There's a lot of different directions we can go. But all of us, producers included, like we all felt it was hard. It was important to make a real definitive, this is the new shit statement.
Yeah, we are not affiliated with the first three outside of it's the Creeper.
Well, even to the, to kind of get into the details, even the kind of the way that the Creeper is presented, in ours, now that the movie's been out, we can talk about it, but ours, he is very diminished. He's very, it kind of starts out like he's in trouble, from the first frame he's in the movie, he's in a weakened state. And you start getting little pieces of the backstory. And so, he's not this giant invincible tank from the get like he is in the others. So I would use that as a great example of how just, sort of far left we veered. Mm-hmm. But it's still the Creeper. And I think that's the important thing is it's still the Creeper. And I don't know if you guys caught there's some Easter eggs in there, where the question of, are there different kinds of creepers? Is there, what's the explanation? What are their creative explanations for the divergence between the two? They find some things in the house. I think if people go back, once they have the streaming or the DVD, there's some little clues in there.
Oh yeah.
As to where we might be going. Again, when I was writing it, I was required to lay out a trilogy as part of my pitch. So, so even if they don't bring me back for movie 2, I've kind of given them a roadmap on where to go. So we were pretty careful about like what little pieces we dropped. Obviously a lot of that stuff is up to the producers as to where they're going to take everything. But I think we planted a pretty significant garden, so we can go in a lot of directions.
And watching it, I think part of why I did like it so much was it was such a departure from, big behemoth Creeper comes in, rips you out, and, you move on. There was more of a, like, hunter-prey feel to it.
Yep.
And, like, I've always felt that kind of fit his character a little bit better. And it was one of the elements of 3 that I actually really liked, where he was, that almost weaker sense, and he had to rebuild himself. That was like the one super redeeming element of 3 that I really liked. But then, we get to Reborn, and what all were your influences when writing this script? Because I have a few ideas as far as like the types of horror movies you kind of see in like sprinkled out through the movie, but I was curious to what like your influence.
Well, I'm a rural Arkansas guy. I grew up in a real small town in Arkansas, so I was kind of raised in that Delta world, and so for me, throughout a lot of my body of work, the voodoo thing, the Southern Gothic thing comes up. I have if you don't want that in your horror movie, probably don't. You better tell me not to put it in there, or I'm going to put it in there. So for me, we're getting a lot of those kind of, there's a big Southern Gothic element in what I was doing with it. And I think there's also there's a lot of 40 Days a Night in my, in my kind of creative, like I was a huge fan of the comic book back in the day, and, I like the movie. So I do kind of like some of that. It's like sort of austerity meets dark fairy tale, which I realize is kind of a paradox, but that's why I like Timo as a director. I feel like, that's why I was really happy with what he did. I felt like he captured that dark fairy tale element of it that I think another director might not have.
Right.
And you're going to get that. This is the guy that did Iron Sky. Any movie you hand him is going to have a little bit of that fairy tale vibe.
Yeah.
No matter what you do. But I was able to, I wrote the first draft of the script, but then once he was brought on, he and I started working together to get, what is ultimately the final shooting script. And, so he was able to kind of see where I wanted this more, almost like a 70s slasher in some ways. And like Walter Hill's Southern Comfort, but like a horror film. but like a creature kind of slasher. Yeah. So we really started collaborating a lot once he was brought onto the project. So I do think this story has a lot of him in it too.
Well, and as I was watching it, and this is why I wanted to ask first, from my viewing perspective, I picked up, it seemed like nods to Halloween with the Cult of Thorn. You had a little, you had some Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Child going on in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some, like, House of a Thousand Corpses, Texas Chainsaw style feel to it. So, I mean, like, you're hitting the franchises.
Well,
and then Creeper comes out, and he is very much in that, like, slasher stalker mode. So, I mean, there's Friday the 13th. You just knocked out the top 4 franchises.
I think you have to wear your influences on your sleeve. I think it's a little disingenuous not to in some respects, especially for a movie like this, because it is a top flight franchise, and we did want to really have it stand out from the others, and I think that's why you're going to see so many of those influences unabashedly.
And it was great. I mean, I don't understand all the hate towards the movie.
My personal opinion is that and it's an issue I have with the movie. Green screen technology, what you have today is going to suck compared to what you have tomorrow.
Right.
I've worked on a lot of animation stuff, Unreal Engine. We buy a motion capture suit, and 6 months later, there's a cheaper, better one. I have like an $80,000 camera piece that from an old studio I had that got shut down, during the pandemic, and we leased it for 2 years for $80,000, and it allows you to do real-time 3D tracking, and those are apps now. So and it was within like an 18-month period. So for better or worse, we happened to make a green screen heavy movie. And a virtual production movie during a time when virtual production technology was experiencing these huge leaps and jumps. So at some point, you just have to draw the line and be like, we got to use the tech we have, because the tech that's coming out tomorrow is going to be better. And I'm not saying that as an excuse, but what I am saying is that we had to make the choice: do we do virtual and do the story we want to do, or do we stay, analog? And just work with the sets we have, and we had to go green screen. That was the only way to really, I think, stay with the integrity of what we were trying to do. You're not finding Louisiana in countryside UK. It's not happening.
No.
And you don't get that fairy tale vibe. You don't get that retro vibe. And then, like I said, even with our influences that we're wearing on our sleeve, like you gotta kind of, if you don't have that Evil Dead cabin or that situation, you got to create it virtually. And so personally, just knowing a lot about that technology, I'm a little sad that we couldn't have all the new bells and whistles, but the fact is those didn't exist even a year ago. And you have to accept that. At some point you have to just be like, hey, my baby's out in the world. Time to go on for the next one. But you have to love it, warts and all. I do. As a creator, you love it, warts and all. And people are entitled to love it or hate it. I think that's okay. I mean, it's all subjective.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying every minute of the movie was like, yeah, I love this movie. But
no.
As a whole, it's a good viewing experience. And it's just, as I'm seeing these reviews, I don't, I couldn't wrap my head around, all the hate. So I went back, I watched it again, thinking, okay, maybe, rose-colored glasses or something. And no, I still, even on the second viewing, I'm like, this is still a solid movie. Does it have its hiccups? Yeah. But almost every movie, unless it's a high-budget, high-production, like, studio-backed film, is going to have hiccups.
Well, so my favorite movie of all time is Brotherhood of the Wolf. And it's this kind of French fantasy horror romance. Yeah. Crazy werewolf movie. But I hated it when I saw it in the theater. I was just like, what? No, it was too much. It was too much. I didn't like it. But then I realized, after about a year, I was like, well, my expectations were out of nowhere. I was confused by like, wait, it's French guys fighting like they're Hong Kong action guys. What is going on? Now I look back at it, and that's one of the reasons it's my favorite. Is I'm just like, they took a lot of crazy creative risks, and it's almost like trying a new food or a new drink for the first time. Even if it's good, it's going to taste weird, and weird oftentimes instinctively feels like bad at first.
Well, and so I think, yeah, that's definitely where Reborn's sitting, because like it's very closely compared to not even the original trilogy, but the original movie. And even its sequels didn't live up to the original movie.
Right.
So at some point, you kind of have to remove yourself and say, all right, this isn't that movie. This will never be that movie. Let me watch it for what it is. And I think people will be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have legs. I think it's gonna have legs, and by necessity, it has to kind of go through this wall of disappointment, or I won't say hate. I think the people that hate it don't actually hate it. I think they just didn't like it. The internet makes everything extra spicy.
They just want something to grumble about.
Yeah, so I think but it's a radical departure, and so it's gonna feel weird. There's no way it's not going to. But now that I've been in this business for so long, I also see how, movies, I mean, I don't want to say forever, but movies certainly do last for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so John Carpenter's The Thing, total bomb, but it's now the bomb. So,
right. Just change the definition.
Yeah.
The movie's still the same.
And give it time.
How many drafts did you go through before, like, the final draft of the movie? Oh,
Lord. At least 20. And that's not, at least 20. And I have to say, that's actually not, that is a lot, but even on some of the movies I've been doing recently, like I filmed one in the Caribbean, just like I got home like a month ago, and I think we did 8 drafts of that one after you do the accepted draft. And as a writer, I'll do 3 or 4 drafts myself before I let anybody see it.
Yeah.
But even after it gets approved, I think we did 8 more drafts. So there is a lot, but something like Jeepers, there's a lot of producers, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of expectation, and so you're creating a new draft. I'm not always privy to who they're talking to and who they're showing it to, and you have to. They wanted to get it right as much as they could on this first one, so you never know where the notes are coming from.
It's crazy.
So there's I mean, and the movie that we shot. Structurally, it's the same. It's always been the same. It's always been the movie that it is. But there's like the ways people sometimes get killed. The horror kills. There's a lot of push pull, a lot of give and take on the kills. The cult. We went back and forth on the cult, or how to build the Horror Hound Festival, and what we want to tease out during those scenes. So it's it's not like writing a book. I mean, it's a recipe.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the script is. It's just a recipe.
Pretty much answered my next question. I was going to ask, how close to your draft did the movie actually stay? Because I know once the script and everything's out, things get changed on the fly. You start to add in that human element, and things kind of get tweaked a little bit. And so I was wondering, just how close everything really.
Yeah, I couldn't. I don't know. I would hesitate to put like a number on it, but I turned in the script, and because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to actually be there for filming, and normally I am on movies that I write. So this was kind of the first one where I handed the script off, and because of the pandemic, me going to the theater was the first time I saw it, and I was happy. And I felt like, okay, yeah, they didn't keep everything, but they kept enough, and there was enough of what I put in there that, I had a great time. I had a great time at the premiere.
Was there anything major that you put in that just didn't make the final cut?
Yeah, but I got to be honest that some of that's a little hard to talk about, because some of the sequences that I had in there that we cut for the express purpose of using them later.
Oh.
Down the store, you know what I mean?
So it's a good cut.
Yeah. Well, the producers felt like I was kind of giving them. I mean, I feel bad for the audiences in some ways. They felt like I was giving them a little too much of what's actually going on. They're like, there's a little too much, because we've developed a backstory. Like, we know what the Creeper is. I don't know if Victor ever did. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I've never spoken with him. But like we made all our choices. We built our world. That's part of how I work as a writer. Is I've got to know everything so that I know how much or how little to let out. So I was disappointed in some of the scenes that were cut, but I know that we did it because we need that card to play later. And so so some of the things, a lot of it has to do with like Lane and her sort of situation.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of scenes in there where they were like, I don't know that we're ready to let that out / commit to it, because right now we've asked a lot of questions and given a couple of answers, but I had a few more answers in my draft, and they were like, we don't want to answer this quite yet. And hey, that's a producer call,
right? Yeah, it's just like fishing. You don't want to let too much line out, and you can't reel it in too tight. Otherwise, end of the day, you're not.
And I'm a team player, and I love the franchise. I would be disappointed if I wasn't brought back. But the film game is the film game,
right?
But I felt like we've got enough material that even if I don't come back, I've gotten my mind out on paper. So if there's another guy who comes up or gal who comes up behind me, like, they're going to have a lot of great material to work with. Like, we really agonized over making sure that we had a complete world and that we had a direction we were going in. Because I don't like the J.J. Abrams mystery box thing. I hate that. If I'm going to put a polar bear in a movie, it's going to matter. So yeah, I hate putting random stuff in movies that don't matter. So for me, I'm like, nope. If the camera lingers on something, it's because it's important.
Okay. Why the record? Why is he obsessed with the record?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this and not get in trouble. Have you ever seen? It's a voodoo movie called The Skeleton Key.
Yeah. And
how they use records in that movie.
Uh-huh.
I'm just saying, maybe watch some of that a little bit, and the answer might be there. It is sound is important. Sound, music, and physical items are really important. So these are so the fact that that's playing and he keeps wanting it to be playing, it is part of a greater contextual ritual that.
Nice.
That I believe as we go into the new movies, there's going to be some really great payoff for that. But it's all very intentional, and I promise it has. I promise that it matters.
Well, and like that's
why when he destroys the record, he freaks out.
Yeah,
like he needs it to be playing when he's doing his thing. So it not playing, that's a turning moment. That's a key moment.
Like, and that's what makes this conversation super tricky, because like there's tons of questions. The movie ends, it's set up for at least a sequel, and then you've already said you penned it for a trilogy. So it's like so many questions, but if you ask them, pretty good odds there's not going to be an answer yet.
Right. Well, like the White Crow. That matters. Like that's not a J.J. Abrams polar bear on an island. That is an important thing. And that, to me, especially as I've been a novelist for a long time, it goes against my instincts a little bit to present something as important, especially something so divergent from the original IP. That's why I'm using the White Crow as an example. Like that's a critical item for what we're doing. But it was not for the others. But just in the way the camera treats it, like, it's important. It's hard to know which answers to give people by the end of the movie, because you want a complete story.
Mm-hmm.
That's you need to tell a complete story. It doesn't matter if you're setting up a sequel if you don't tell at least a 3-part. You got to have your 3 acts. I don't want to be Marvel where I'm like, why did they spend 20 minutes on this when it. when it doesn't matter.
I mean, the payoff's like 30 years from now.
Right, but you know, at the same time, you do have to balance that with the business aspect and what your producers want. You know, your producers are like, we want you to plant a bunch of seeds in movie 1 so that as they bear fruit in movie 2 and movie 3, people are like, oh yeah, it's that, or they have a burning question that gets answered. But you also have to answer enough in the first movie that people sequel.
Yeah.
And so there is a best example I can think of, the series Carnival from HBO.
Mm-hmm.
I was okay when it got canceled at season 2 because the story was, for the most part, complete. There were a couple of loose threads, but at least the showdown between the two main characters had been resolved. There were a lot of subplots that were left hanging, but their primary showdown, you know, was complete. So for this one, the first confrontation between Lane and the Creeper has concluded.
Yeah.
You know, and that's there's a lot of dangling threads, but at least that conflict is that chapter of the conflict is resolved. It's not like we cut the movie right before they, you know, they're not leaping in the air towards each other, and we cut it right before they collide. Like,
right.
At least, you know, like at least there's still a definitive, like the credits roll, and you're like, okay, I watched the complete story, even if I'm like ready for the second.
Yeah, say better or worse, the story's over. It's there was a start, there's a beginning, middle, and an end, and you can walk away from it knowing, all right, that happened.
Yeah, well, like Halloween, the newest Halloween trilogy. I felt like, you know, I have some opinions about it, but like I felt like the transition from movie 1 to movie 2 in that trilogy I thought was great. You know, like you have Michael, he's in the house, it's on fire, like we cut. Cool. So movie 2 starts, Michael's in the house on fire. We could have waited 10 years for that, and it would have been fun. Right.
There's one line of dialogue that I thought was just hope. And it's when Lane and her boyfriend are going to the horror convention, and they first start talking about the Creeper. And, you know, she goes, weren't there some movies about this or something? And he's like, something to the effect of, yeah, but those are just fake. You know, this is a real deal. It's like, that's how you set yourself apart, damn it.
Yeah, no, you have to. That was, you know, I've done a lot of different work. You know, sometimes I'll write a script that I pitch to studios or to companies. It gets picked up and we go make the movie. More often than not, I'm being brought in because the producers, you know, have like a movie they want to make, and they've got some specific requests. And it's almost like building furniture on custom. And one of the specific requests from the producer was, you know, in our movie, I want the other movies to be movies. I'm like, okay, you know, other franchises have done that. I'm like, all right, if that's what you want, that's what I'm going to give you. But I don't know how to do it without being a little snarky. And he's like, you can be snarky. Because I'm like, if you're gonna make it where the Creeper is something that people know about, and we're gonna talk about how these movies are already out, you know, we're committing to something. We're gonna have to own that for the whole movie. So, you know, we need to lean into it. And if that's, you know, that was one of their requests, I'm like, all right, you're the boss, you got it. We're gonna lean into it.
And it was fun to watch because, yeah, from that moment on, it was very much like, all right, the original 3 are in universe, but they're not real. They're, you know, movies in universe. This is a real story. This is a living, breathing organism that we have to deal with right now.
Right. Yep.
And it was a nice change, especially considering we, you know, in the original, in 3 movies, there was maybe 3 people that knew about the Creeper.
Right.
You know, this guy comes back all the time, wiping people out, and nobody knows anything. It was always one of my biggest hang-ups.
No, I get that. Well, and I kind of liked, you know, there was a scene actually that I can talk about. In the original script, the Creeper actually attacks the festival, and there's a scene where the cops roll in, and there's like some guys in Creeper outfits. They don't really know who to shoot. And so, you know, it turned out to be, it was a little bit too big to stage. And we felt like, it kind of takes away from some of the pacing in the house to be, because like once we get to the house, we want to be in the house. And it just did, having the creeper go all the way back to the festival, like it didn't make sense. But we did have that in there where we were planning on using that a little bit. The cops shoot the guy in the creeper outfit that's not the actual creeper. Stuff like that is what ends up on the floor. But the intention was to really lean into the idea that this is a fictional character and this is a festival, about it. And so the both the beast and the cult are going to use that to their advantage.
Oh yeah. So before we wrap all this up, what's next for you? Like, what do you have coming on the horizon?
I've been working with a company called MSR. They're out of a little island in the Lower Antilles. It's called Nevis, in the Caribbean. And I did a movie called Black Noise for them with Alex Pettifer. It's like kind of a cosmic horror meets action thriller sort of thing. That's in post now. And I'm doing my first action movie with them. I've got a lot of action kind of scripts out there in development, but this is the first one that's going to actually go because, again, I'm a sci-fi horror guy. But, when the producers are like, hey, we liked this action thriller element of this cosmic horror movie you just did with us, so let's do that. So it's essentially like almost like an island version of Vin Diesel's Triple X, which again for me is a radical departure. But it's fun. This for the first time I'm sitting here getting to decide, like, all right, well, do we do the speedboat chase first, or the jet skis, or the underwater shark attack? We're hiring a lot like a huge stunt team. So for me, it's weird going from something like Jeepers Creepers and just recently doing a cosmic horror, and now I'm doing, kind of a bombastic action thing. So for me, creatively, it's really fun to just kind of getting into new territory. Nice. I can't rely on the tropes quite so much. The action genre, it has its own other visual language. So yeah, that's fun. That's what I'm working on right now. I think we start filming in April.
Nice. Where can listeners follow you on like social media to watch for your upcoming projects and things like that?
Twitter, finding me on Twitter, Sean Michael Argo, that works. I'm pretty active on my blog, which also links to my, my if you follow me on Twitter or look me up on Amazon, my author page like auto populates. So yeah, just typing me into either Amazon or Google and I'm pretty out there. And I discovered, as a result of Jeepers Creepers, let me put it that way, as a result of Jeepers Creepers, I discovered, I'm everywhere. It's really easy to get in touch with me.
And listeners, I will put those links in the episode description for easy access. You can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com, or if you just want to follow me, head over to Facebook and Twitter and just look up Moose Media Inc. Sean, this has been really fun. And in a few months, let's do this again and tear into the movie. Once it's been out a little bit longer and it's got some legs, we'll.
I'm not scared. Let's do it.
We'll do a deep dive into the movie.
Okay, that's great.
And because there's so many things I want to talk about, but I want to give people a chance to sit down and watch it first. And it's like, so much.
Let them sit with it. No, that sounds good. That sounds good.
So, thank you for coming on today. And listeners, tune in tomorrow for another installment of the 13 Horror-fying Days of Christmas. And until next time, Nash on.